Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and we now begin with our exploration of the year 2000, which could be considered a slight step down from 1999 in terms of overall quality. Now we certainly have more rancid stink piles to get through, but thankfully we have a good number of entertaining titles as well, so that's a good thing. Unfortunately, Part 1 of this video is going to cover the more underwhelming titles, in my opinion, while Part 2 will cover the better stuff. But before we begin, I have my honorable mentions, of course, and the best of which is the excellent Battle Royal from Japan, which I personally classify as a thriller-action hybrid with some horror elements. But Battle Royal is a must-see if you haven't already. A few other honorable mentions here are Freeze Me, a good exploitation-ish Japanese thriller, The Isle, a quality dark Korean drama with an edge, and Black Honeymoon, a particularly terrible Korean thriller comedy hybrid that you should avoid at all costs. Now let's get started with the year 2000. And as always, titles for all of the movies I discuss are listed in the description box below. And we begin with what is basically a two-way tie for the worst Asian horror film of 2000, and they are both from the same franchise, unfortunately. The first of which is Troublesome Night 7, a Hong Kong horror comedy. Now, following in the footsteps of Troublesome Night 6, this installment scraps the anthology structure of the previous entries and goes for one single storyline, which concerns a production team that travels to a remote coast to film a music video, but finds themselves haunted by two dead lovers. Now, thankfully, Louis Koo returns here and adds at least something to this crapfest. Whenever Louis Koo shows up, it doesn't necessarily make everything great, but it helps. But unfortunately, poor Louis can't save this one. This movie relies too heavily on hysterical behavior and jump scares to earn frights. And if you want to get on my bad side, if you're a filmmaker and you make a horror film and you want to get on my bad side, give me hysterical behavior and jump scares. It immediately irritates me. And that's what this film does. It comes off as pathetic and obnoxious, to be frank. Now, there's also too much dead weight to sit through. Tedious filler material, and of course annoying characters. That's all I have to say about this one. It's awful, and you should avoid it. So let's move on to the second film here that shares the nefarious title for Worst Asian Horror Film from 2000, and that is, of course, Troublesome Night 8. Man, this series really is starting to circle the toilet drain, isn't it? A Hong Kong horror comedy again. Now here's the plot synopsis from Wikipedia. Bud Pitt, yes, the lead character's name here is Bud Pitt, and his girlfriend, Moon, leave the city and move to the countryside for a new life. Now, while moving in, Bud accidentally knocks over a small cremation urn and is disturbed by a spirit for a while. On the other hand, he is attracted to his new cheerful neighbor, Olive. He becomes suspicious of her when he sees her roaming the streets at night, not recognizing him and behaving like a completely different person. He seeks help from his mother, an expert ghostbuster, well, how convenient, who helps them unravel the mystery behind Olive. So, that's your plot synopsis. Overall, this is a cheap, boring movie with no atmosphere. There's no mood, no atmosphere, no creepiness, nothing here. The characters are annoying, which is becoming a trend here in the series. Not a lick of quality to be found anywhere in this film. Now, really, when I think about it, when I looked at my notes, I might actually say that Troublesome Night 8 might actually eke out Troublesome Night 7 as the worst Asian horror film from this year, because Louis Koo is no longer in this franchise at this point. From Troublesome Night 8 on, he's nowhere to be found, per my knowledge. His career started taking off, and he moved on to bigger and better things. Now, the actor who takes over this franchise, at least for the next handful of installments, I believe, is a man named Simon Liu. He takes the reins, and he's a huge downgrade from Louis. Huge downgrade. This guy is just practically unwatchable. He's bad. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm sorry, my friend, if you're watching this video, Simon, but you were pretty bad in these. Now, when a movie series contributes 2 awful installments like this in a row, you can basically write it off. You can really write it off. But I was dumb enough to watch parts 9 and 10, so we're going to get to those in a later video. But at this point, my patience with this series has run out. I don't think I can watch any more of them. So if you're hoping for a review of Troublesome Night 11, I need some type of compensation in order to sit through one of these again. So let's move on here. We're still just digging through these stink piles, man. The next one, Kyoko versus Yuki. Japanese exploitation horror action film. Now, this direct-to-video film by our good friend Daisuke Yamanouchi, if you've seen my previous videos, you know who he is, involves schoolgirls who fight to the bloody death. Now, from what little I remember here, I think the plot involves a stash of drugs at some point and a trained schoolgirl assassin, maybe. It sounds great, but not so much. This is less than 60 minutes long, but my notes here say that it is, quote, obnoxious crap, unquote. Too many dumb sex scenes, I've noted. The fights are mediocre, and the gore isn't memorable enough to make it worthwhile. You can skip this one. If you want to get into Yamanouchi's filmography, again, I say start with Muzan-e and then move to the Red Room films. Skip this one. It's not. Just skip it, please. The next film here. We move to South Korea now, and it is called The Record, a horror film from our good friends in South Korea. Now, this is one of the stupidest horror movie plots in existence. Now listen to this. Really listen to this plot and tell me this isn't the dumbest thing you've ever heard. A group of high school friends decide to prank their classmate by, okay, get this, kidnapping him and stabbing him with a fake knife. Only the knife turns out not to be fake. So apparently these morons never thought of actually testing the knife beforehand or something. I don't know. Man, that's bad. Now, talk about a contrived, idiotic basis for a movie. Here you have one. So anyways, later on, some masked dude starts stalking and killing the teens. So this sounds vaguely familiar to I Know What You Did Last Summer, right? Well, as you might have guessed, the overall quality here is not very good. So for example, okay, no big spoilers here in case you want to check out this turd burglar. The logic while fleeing from the murderer is unimpressive. Okay, with the protagonists frequently painting themselves into corners instead of running away. At one point, I'll give you a little example here. At one point, a girl escapes, then, for some unknown reason, which I didn't quite get, decides to find the killer with the help of a little old lady. That does not end well. Now, a few minutes later, this same girl locks a glass door between her and the killer. Okay, and then inexplicably goes into the locker room no more than 20 feet away to change into her clothes while the killer bashes in the door. There are other flaws too, but man, the character decision making in this is just abhorrent. The production values here are quite bad, with some pretty awful cinematography and a crappy score. On a positive side, though, the girls are quite sexy for the guys out there, and there is one cool moment when a honking car is used to trace a telephone call, so look out for that. It's pretty cool. But this movie overall just ends up being nothing more than a clinic on how a slasher film should not be made. So skip this one. Next here, we move back to Japan for Living Hell. Now in this one, a wheelchair-bound teen is left at the mercy of an old woman and a girl who looks like she's been beaten by an ugly tree. And coming from me, that's really saying something. So this has some obvious similarities to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's not nearly as great as that film was. In fact, Living Hell is quite bad in my opinion. The acting in particular is just very unimpressive. the facial expressions by a lot of the actors here have like a very forced, ooh, I'm scared look. It's kind of hard to describe, but it just didn't work for me at all. Scoring is a bit hit or miss here. There doesn't seem to be much psychological build-up to anything, and the violence is actually surprisingly tame, with a few exceptions of some bloody moments. Also, the protagonist's decision-making is amongst the worst I've seen, I have in my notes here, which, you know, after covering some of the films we've already covered in this video, that statement is quite an impactful one. Ooh, man. With that said, okay, the first half of this film is marginally enjoyable as it sets things up, but the second half is just, it just did not work for me. I found it to be rather dumb. Don't recommend this. Now, if you want an Asian horror film with that Texas Chainsaw Massacre flavor to it, we are going to cover an Indonesian film from 2009, which is way better than Living Hell. So look out for that one when we get to that year. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. Just look forward to it when we get to that year. All right, the next film here, we move to Hong Kong with Dial D for Demons. Now here's another Wikipedia plot summary here for you. You know, I tend to rely on some of my notes, and my notes sometimes are very short and to the point. So sometimes I like to give you a little bit of a more full idea of what the plot is. So bear with me here. Now in Dial D for Demons, a group of 6 youngsters travel to Lantau Island for a holiday in a vacation villa. The place meets their expectations, but strange things start happening once they step into the house, of course. One of them, named Big Bully, yes, Big Bully, has the ability to see ghosts and spirits. Well, how convenient. And he senses imminent danger. Well, before he can warn his friends, however, he is found dead inside his room. This is very early in the film, so it's not a spoiler. Now, the others are shocked. They attempt to leave the place, but, you know, it's one of those supernatural flicks where all the roads are blocked and you can't really get out of the house. You can't really get out of there, really. So, they have to spend the night there. And then, you know, crazy stuff starts happening. They get messages that they're going to die on their beepers. The house seems to have a life of its own. And, you know, of course, they separate from each other and all sorts of crazy stuff starts happening. Now, this sounds like an action-packed horror film, doesn't it? But, unfortunately, it is not very good. The bad acting is one big weakness here. Every character acts hysterical. Again, we're faced with a film where the characters just act hysterically for no reason. Like, I know you're in this bad predicament, but to act hysterical every single minute is just... You can't do that and expect me to enjoy this movie. And I'm a guy who loved Tetsuo the Iron Man. Talk about a movie with hysterical behavior, but that film was set in a nightmarish existence, and it seemed to work a lot better there. And even in that film, there's some downtime at times. So, this one, Dial D for Demons, I have more negatives to go through here. The scare tactics are shamelessly lazy and poorly constructed. These people basically just run around in circles and scream. One positive, though, is that the magical time loop element that prevents anyone from leaving is something that I like. It's one of the benefits of having a supernatural type threat, you know, because, you know, if you're in a slasher film, like a character's cell phone doesn't work, you just kind of roll your eyes, but in a supernatural film, it might make sense, right? The limitations and I guess the obstacles could be more, maybe not convincing, but more, I guess, less contrived. So that's a positive to this. Everything else, though, just kills the experience. And actually, when I think about it, you barely get to see any demons at all in this. I mean, people are like running around and there's some like special effects going on, but even when like the bad guys show up, they don't even really look like demons. It's, yeah, disappointing. Not good. So, don't watch this one either, if you want to take my advice. Alright, next. This is just brutal, isn't it? Just, if you like videos of people that are just teeing off on bad movies, this will be one of your favorites. Got another crap fest here. Bloody Beach from South Korea. A group of chat room buddies decide to meet together in person on the beach for some fun in the sun. However, their vacation transforms into a nightmare, of course, as each person is gruesomely murdered by a mysterious madman. So this movie tries to emulate, other types of slasher films, but it's lacking in some of the most important areas. On the positive side, though, the girls are smoking hot in this, and a few death scenes are pretty good. But on the negative side, there's too much dull filler. The dialogue and the script are very weak. The characters are just boring. There's no atmosphere, and overall, it has kind of a dumb vibe to it. It just feels kind of shoddy and B grade. This has none of the stylish flair that one would expect from a South Korean film, from any genre. It really does feel like a cheap B-grade American slasher. So that's really kind of disappointing, you know what I mean? I know this was made at the turn of the century while the Korean new wave was still kind of gaining momentum, but you would expect it to be at least a little bit more stylish, to have a certain Korean flair to it, but this really doesn't. Do not recommend it. Alright, so let's see here. We have 3 more underwhelming Asian horror films from the year 2000 left to cover in this video. And all 3 of these will have their defenders. So at least we're getting into films that have some positives to them, that actually have some fans that are going to be willing to defend them. So I'm ready for it. The next one that we're going to cover in particular may not be a popular opinion, I would say, but I actually rewatched it this week and I still do not like it. So I'm pretty firm in my stance on this one. And that is Wild Zero, Japanese comedy horror film. In this film, a rock band and some other people attempt to survive a zombie invasion. Now things start off fairly well here, with an unorthodox style, but there's very little effort put into constructing scary and or funny zombie attacks. Now, this was helmed by a music video director, and it shows because it's shot and edited rather incompetently, in my opinion. The zombie attacks themselves are marred by extreme close-up shots. They just don't look right. They're mostly boring to watch, with the exception of a few pretty good moments near the end. There are a few pretty good moments near the end that I liked, but for the most part, the zombie attacks just are not well shot or constructed. The humor now, in general, is rather ineffective, I think. It uses a lot of low-hanging fruit, as I like to say, and is lacking in cleverness. I don't know. I mean, you do have kind of this odd premise of like the rock band and zombies, which gives it a little bit of a nuance, but the actual humor itself, I just wasn't all that impressed with. In terms of characterization, the female characters I found to be watchable, but the male characters are at times very annoying and they scream too much. That's like a theme in this video, isn't it? Hysterical behavior and characters screaming too much. You can tell what gets on my nerves in some of these movies. There were also some stretches where not much interesting happens. The use of rock music is a little bit different, and I like that, but even that is used a bit too much, and it becomes obnoxious. It's excessively loud at times, almost like drowning out the whole film, and it becomes overly intrusive as it just shreds the viewer's ears and distracts from what's happening on screen. Sometimes when the music kicks in, I'm just like, whoa, man, I mean, really? Like, I'm taken completely out of the film here, so I even didn't like that too much. So, in the end, Wild Zero is a slightly unusual zombie film that I think suffers from some of the typical flaws of this subgenre of horror, and also some of the flaws that it just created itself. So, if you're a fan, I'm sorry, but I did not like this one. So next, we have another zombie film, and it's from Japan again. And some of these, I'm telling you, man, zombie films in general, there's something, the odd thing is that I love zombie video games, like Resident Evil, especially the earlier titles there. I really enjoyed that, one of my favorite horror video game series of all time. But like for some reason, zombie films, and I am a fan of a good number of them, but that subgenre just rubs me the wrong way a lot. Asian and other countries too. So it's you're getting to see that here. And the next zombie film we're covering is Junk from Japan. It's kind of an action horror hybrid. Now in this film, a group of jewel thieves attempt to exchange their latest steal for Yakuza cash at an abandoned military base overrun by flesh-eating zombies. So this has a decent setup here. You got some thieves and Yakuza fighting against zombies. The last one we had a rock band. This one we got Yakuza and thieves. But again, it just doesn't seem to tap in and really take advantage of this scenario as much as it should. I mean, I've read that this movie pays homage to Reanimator, Reservoir Dogs, and the original Dawn of the Dead, but it's not as good as any of those films. Yeah, you know, a handful of people are eaten, and a few dozen zombies are blown away, but there are simply not enough cool deaths or atmosphere in this film to make it memorable, I think. There's also some pretty bad acting to sit through at times. Overall, I just thought Junk was a fairly run-of-the-mill B-grade flick that, you know, I can't really recommend that much. I even watched this film, I've seen this film 2 times, I think at least. Not recently, but I remember the second time I watched it, I confirmed my thoughts. So, you know, I don't know. If you're a fan of zombie films, then maybe you'll want to check out Wild Zero and Junk, but I'm officially not recommending them. So, we've come to our final film in this video. And it's, you know, it's not all that bad. You know, the last few films we've covered have not been all that bad. It's also true for this one. This is the closest one to being good, I think. So, take that as you will. And this film is called Nightmare from South Korea. Now, this is a pretty good, albeit generic storyline that drives... I would say that this is really a supernatural slasher flick. It's basically about a small group of friends who must come to terms with the death of their friend, who committed suicide while they were in college. Now, as expected, there are some nefarious events behind the death, and that could cause some problems for these characters in the present day. This movie just overall is what I call a mixed bag. Got some good stuff, some not so good stuff. Some of the horror elements are a bit on the bland side, but others were executed quite well. I particularly enjoyed the telephone booth killing, so I guess you could look out for that one. There are some big name actors in this, man. Ji-won Ha, a mega popular actress who is rather inconsistent with the roles that she takes. She's one of those South Korean actresses where I'm willing to watch anything that she's in, but I'm always kind of skittish because she has picked a number of pretty bad movies to be in. And she's not like a Soo-young Lim, who Soo-young Lim usually picks good movies to be in. Ji-won Ha, you don't know what you're going to get when she's in one. Also, Ji Tae-yu is in this, who played the villain in Old Boy and also the villain in Midnight FM. So you got some good actors here, but I guess that's something to look forward to. If you're a fan of these actors, you want to see one of their earlier movies, well, this movie's got that. The performances and the direction here are fine, but the introduction of a dominant human antagonist I thought was a bit ill-advised here. I think it hurt the creepiness of the film, and I just didn't like how the storyline shifted in that direction. It actually resulted in some of the blandest aspects of the story that I just did not work for me. The very ending, specifically the final minute, is actually quite good, I think, but it's a little too little too late for me. Can't quite make up for some of the other negatives. So Nightmare is not a bad film by any means. It doesn't quite cut it for me. I rewatched this one a few times as well, thinking it was going to get over that hump, you know, and get into recommendable territory, but it always just falls short for me, so I can't recommend it. So those are the Asian horror films from 2000 that I disliked. But be sure to tune in for part 2 of this video, where we will discuss the more entertaining films from the year 2000. And as always, we'll see you next time.